Squad, TRG here coming at you with another video on mining rigs and how specifically to build one from home for cheap. Here is the hardware we're going to be using today. Here we have a 1600 watt Hercules power supply from Rosewill. This power supply comes packed with 12 PCIe power connectors for graphics cards. The next component we need for our build is a hard drive. Any 2.5 inch or 3.5 inch drive will work. This is a 2.5 inch drive, and this is a 3.5 inch drive. Here is the processor we are going to be using for this setup. This is a 2.9 GHz Intel Celeron for the LGA 1151 socket. This is a TB250 BTC board that has 6 PCIe ports. These will allow us to connect all of the graphics cards for mining. Here is one of the SATA-powered risers that will allow us to connect all of the graphics cards to the PCI ports. Here is the USB cable that connects to the riser and the PCIe connector, which is in the bag. This now connects to the motherboard, which allows the graphics card to communicate with the motherboard. The SATA power connector simply connects to the SATA power on the riser. Now we have one of the 6 graphics cards that we'll be using for this mining rig. In this case, it's a GTX 1080 Ti from MSI. Here we have one stick of 8GB DDR4 RAM. I have found that with high performance cards, 8GB of RAM does increase mining hash rates. Alright, so with the hardware out of the way, let's talk about the frame. So I'm using 2x2s for the frame, and also 1x2s for the top bar as well. And the measurements for the frame I'll have in the description of the video, so you guys can replicate it if you like. Okay, now that we have the bottom half built, we can look at building the top half and then adding our side supports. Now that the side supports are added to the bottom, we can add the top half and then have our top piece finished. Then we just need to create the platform for the motherboard and power supply to sit on. We will be using some hardboard from Home Depot for our platform. The first thing we want to do is lay out our components on the hardboard and trace around them. This will allow us to place our components easily after trimming the hardboard. The width of the hardboard can simply be determined by the width of the mining rig frame. Here I'm using a level and I'm just tracing out some lines that I can use to cut with and then have a nice sizable hardboard, nothing too large and nothing too small. Here I'll be using an X-Acto knife just to score the hardboard so that I can snap it down to size. Now we can start placing our components and then screwing them into place so that we can put the frame on top. It is important to note that I do keep the anti-static foam underneath the motherboard while I screw it into the hardboard. This ensures that the solder points on the motherboard aren't crushed or damaged or heavily in contact with the hardboard itself or any other material. Also note that I don't screw in the motherboard too tight because it could bend the motherboard and wreck the contact points. The next thing you want to do is install the RAM on the motherboard before you screw down the frame to the hardboard. Otherwise, it's a pain to get it in there. The next thing we want to do is just have the frame on top and then screw it in from the back so that it's nice and sturdy. This beast isn't going anywhere. Now we can start to mount the power supply. Now how I chose to mount this was by using regular screws and screwing them into the hardboard tight enough that they would squeeze the power supply down onto the hardboard. There's several other ways to do this, but this is a quick, cheap, and fast, effective way that I've found to do it. And as you can see, this platform is really sturdy, it's durable, it's not going anywhere, and your investment is secured. Stay tuned for part 2 and find out how I wire everything up and tie in the graphics cards.